single pot stills. So I guess this is, in many ways what Middleton would be more known for, would be our single pot still whiskey. So I suppose before we jump into whiskey number 3, could one of you guys maybe give us a little bit of context about single pot still whiskey as a style?
Yeah, so single pot still, again, it's the traditional quintessential style of Irish whiskies going back hundreds of years. This particular single pot still, it's made from a cereal mix of malted barley and unmalted barley. Okay, so they're mixed together. That's the cereal mix. They're then brewed, goes through fermentation, and then it goes through a triple distillation with copper pot stills. And then that distillate comes off the still at about 84% alcohol. And what we do then is we reduce it down to around 63% alcohol with water, and then it's put into a cask of whatever type, and then it's sent off to a warehouse for maturation. So that is the process of producing a single pot still whiskey. Mixture of barley and unmalted barley, triple distilled in copper pot stills, and then matured in a range of different types of barrels. So in this particular case here, this whiskey would have started off its life matured in a mixture of American bourbon barrels and Oloroso sherry. And what we did then is that we took that parcel of cask and we recast it into chestnut barrels for just over maybe 12 to 15 months. And we call that finishing in chestnut.
Yeah.
The chestnut casks, they're French chestnut, they come from France. We deal with a cooperage there called Sung and Moreau, and they supply the French chestnut casks. I suppose the thing to note here, Joe, is that people might get mixed up between horse chestnut and this is actually sweet chestnut. It's completely different to horse chestnut. Okay, so
somebody had said to me it's actually traditionally a Spanish one, so it's actually French-Spanish chestnut.
Well, this one is actually French chestnut.
Yeah. Okay.
But we also acquired some Spanish chestnut as well. Yeah. This is actually French chestnut. Yeah. Again, it's the same species. It's sweet chestnut, Castanea sativa, and there's a huge amount of chestnut growing in France. We were there a number of years ago, and we were brought to Chestnut Forest just outside Paris. Remember?
Yeah,
it's called the King's
near Versailles.
Near Versailles, it's called the King's Forest, and this is an amazing forest just covered in chestnut, huge chestnut trees. So a lot of chestnut. There is also a small amount of chestnut growing in Ireland as well, some sweet chestnut. Yeah. But I think it's important for people to maybe just distinguish. You've horse chestnut and sweet, and they're completely different. Yeah. You don't use horse chestnut for maturing whiskey.
Yeah. Along that trip as well, it wasn't just the trip for the fun of it. There was a reason for it, which was ensuring we're carrying out due diligence to make sure that we're not doing anything detrimental to the environment. We have to make sure that there's plenty of chestnut there. And in fairness to the French chestnut, the ONF, who are kind of like a state forestry management group, do fantastic work. And these estates have been managed for hundreds of years. This was the King's Forest that we visited, and it's fantastic. Big, long, straight trunks, no branches coming off it, and that's really what you look for when you're looking for cooper and grade wood. Because if you have branches coming off it, you're going to have knots, and that's not desirable. So, we refer to it as grade 1 wood, I suppose. No imperfections really.
I think the thing as well with the French forestry, we'd have to, an incredible arrangement there in terms of growing forests. Yeah. I mean, it goes back to, I think, the 1600s where they started to I suppose, control and ensure the proper standards going back hundreds of years. And right to this day,
seems like they're really ahead of the game in terms of
sustainability. Oak and chestnut was really important in terms of be it shipbuilding or construction. So they were very careful looking after their forests, and that's why they did it back in the 1600s, 1700s.
And they reap the benefits from it now. You look at how much French oak is used around the world on the wines.
Known for its quality.
It's fantastic quality, yeah.
So on the nose, the chestnut. And again, when we did our trials on this a number of years ago, I remember the first tasting we did. It was Billy Light and myself, and we had the first sort of samples after a few months maturation. And we said, "Wow, this is very, very distinctive." Yeah. I mean, it's lovely. I mean, first of all, I think just observe the colour, sort of a deep, rich colour. The chestnut has quite a lot of tannins, and it's quite a lot of extractives coming out into the whiskey. But on the nose, I think a very distinctive for me chocolate, rich toffee, There is some fruit there as well, maybe ripe plums. But I think the chocolate toffee caramel note is very.
I definitely get that darker chocolate, like almost like a darker wood kind of character coming through.
I suppose, kind of dark chocolate.
Banana for me, banoffee pie really kind of comes to mind as sweetness,
Yeah, like a very, very ripe banana.
Yeah.
I know this one, when it was launched, was the one that people seemed to get very excited, very intrigued about, because it was essentially perhaps the first.
Yeah, it was probably pushing the boundaries in terms of using different types of wood, and this was the first one.
It was very big, talking point.
Yeah.
It was our first foray really into it,
And that is I suppose one of the advantages of making whiskey in Ireland. We have a little bit more freedom in terms of the type of woods that we can use. Whereas in Scotland they're a little bit in some cases a bit more restricted in terms of being only able to use oak.
Yeah, it's a big advantage for us
in
the Irish technical file that we can actually use different types of woods, and we're going to look at more now shortly. But it's a huge advantage because there's so much scope out there and so much innovation with the different types of woods and finishes that it's fantastic for Irish whiskey.
But I must say, I think we touched. These are obviously all fantastic, but I'm sure you've had things that you've tried and haven't worked quite as you'd expected or hoped.
Yeah, we have a bit of that, but
I suppose over the years we've kind of refined our kind of system on how we look at these. This first batch through Sigma Maru, a lot of it was getting the barrels, putting the whiskey in the barrel, and just continuously watching it. But what we do is, we do a lot of stuff in the background, from an analysis point of view. We do density and porosity tests, which gives us a kind of an indication of what that wood type is like. As I mentioned with the limousine oak, was very wide grained. A lot of these wood alternatives, they differ structurally quite substantially between all of them. Acacia is coming up there. It's very similar in terms of properties from oak, but when you look at the likes of the wild cherry, the chestnut, they're not as dense. They're more open, porous. Some give off more wood extractive. Some, they don't change in colour like the wild cherry. So we do a lot of kind of analysis from that respect to try and kind of understand the wood, and that gives us a bit of a picture of how. So
you kind of an idea of what might look like at the finished product, or an idea of what to expect.
We also do the miniature barrels as well. So for particular wood types, rather than filling a big barrel with whiskey, we might do miniature trials first. So we get small barrels, maybe 2 or 3 litres, 4 litres. We get a barrel made, and then we'd put some distillate into that, and then we'd analyse it carefully over weeks and months to see how it's performing. So therefore, you have a sort of an accelerated maturation with those small barrels, which gives us a picture of where it's going to go, and that's what we do.
It's proof of concept that we're not just mad; it might actually work.
It does actually sound like the balance of method and madness there. You really do have the kind of careful planning process, but also really pushing the boat out to trying something so special.
Yeah, we have a taste.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, Sláinte. Okay, a lot of mouthfeel here. It has the creaminess. It does dry out after a while because of those extra tannins in chestnut. But it's still then, the fruits are there. You have the little bit of spice there as well. I think I get a little bit of banana now as well coming through, and
getting a little bit towards the end.
And again, you have this sort of toffee caramel and fudge maybe there as well on the taste.
Very sweet.
That with the heavy pot still style and that tannin just gives it such a rich character.
And even though it is the finish is very long, even though there is sort of a dryness there as well because of the extra tannins, but it's still quite a long finish.
Yeah, it kind of makes you want to go back and have another sip.
It's really good. I think Finbar mentioned as well there about density and porosity of different types of woods, which is really important. And the way I explain it to people is, if you take a block of American oak, which is very dense, and you have a meter cubed, 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter of American oak, it weighs roughly 780, 790 kilograms per meters cubed.
Yeah.
If you compare that to, say, chestnut, that same meter cubed of chestnut weighs about 550, 590.
Wow.
So it's a lot less dense. Yeah. And that's how I kind of explain to people.
Is that it's really to do with the time it takes to grow then?
Yeah, it's just the growing conditions. It's the species of the oak, and we'll talk shortly about cherry. But acacia, for example, would weigh the same as the American oak. They're very similar in terms of density. So that's
so even when you're rocking the barrel, the chestnuts are so light in comparison to a standard oak barrel,
Yeah.
fascinating stuff.
It really is. With a comment there from Richard, just praising the range, loves Method Madness, and he says it must be either a Cooper's dream or a nightmare.
I suppose when we went back to the start of this, maybe 10 years ago, doing trials in different wood types, for example, chestnut, because it's quite porous, that it would just leak.
Yeah.
But then our specification for the actual cask is quite a thick stave, and when we got the cask in, we had very few leaks.
Very few leaks.
It was fantastic.
Wow.
And the same applied to cherry. We were worried about leaks as well, but it didn't actually transpire, which was great.
Yeah.
A lot of these casks kind of came in around the same time from, as Kevin mentioned earlier, this Cooper, Sigmund Maru, and to be fair to them, they kind of took a risk. Like, we had reached out to our affiliates in Martel to kind of say, look, because we didn't deal directly with some of the Cooperages in France, and they recommended Sigmund Maru in Cognac there, and to be fair to them, they took on this kind of experimentation, because they predominantly used oak as well over their history. And these were all small batches. We were getting kind of test batches of about 12 barrels, 12 hogsheads, which is about 225 litre in capacity. But it was fantastic that they kind of came along that journey with us.
Yeah,
we kind of leveraged our relationship there with them, and thankfully they came along, because it's not easy. This is very much unknown. They're giving us a price for a barrel, but we ordered 12 barrels, we got 9 because there was porosity with a number of the staves in those barrels. So that's part and parcel of the process, I suppose.
Yeah, we can only do so much planning.
Yeah.
And I'd say there must be quite a difference in price in terms of the cost of some of these would probably fluctuate quite a bit too.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to move on. So we've had that was our method.